Good morning. This is Jason Dean at YouTube, Film Fanatic. If you get a chance, it's greatly appreciated if you can, like and subscribe to my weird little page. I really appreciate it. You know, uh, it's been quite a fun journey diving into this page and diving into this new YouTube format that I have. I'm running currently. I'm running like 3 pages together, so it's a super blast. It's a blast, and it's a cool. For me, it feels like a nice, like cool, cathartic release of, talking about a lot of movies and things that really mean a lot to me. And with this show, I try to change the format. I try to keep it loose, but I try to incorporate other things that are not necessarily all related to film. For me, it really is. It's all exclusive in the way films and music kind of play like a real integral part to just for me being a fan, but also a tremendous source of inspiration, especially when it comes to writing music, in particular with my band Quantum. So it's all of these things are such a huge influence on me, and it's and it's a really great, kind of exciting new thing to do, especially with the YouTube channel. I was pretty reluctant to get into the YouTube channel thing because reluctant might be a strong word, but I was a little bit hesitant because when I started my Facebook page, the Film Fanatic Facebook page, quite a few years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, I basically just set it up as just doing reviews, basically just through posts. And then about a year ago, I started doing these Facebook Live videos, and I noticed that stuff started to really attract people, and I was starting to get a lot more hits on my page, and it was very cool. And since then, it's grown you know to a sizable audience. And then I don't know, it's probably about 5 or 6 months ago I started an Instagram page. With me and technology and social media, I have a I'm usually late to the game a lot of the time. And like the same thing with Instagram, where initially I was hesitant to dive into putting up a Instagram page because I felt like from what I had seen on my own time, checking out Instagram, it seemed like it was mostly about people's, photos, selfies, and photography, and it wasn't really necessarily about, video content or talking about things that you're doing in a musical format or an artistic format. It didn't seem to be a thing that you could really use for promoting shows. That was my first impression, but I was really wrong. And I had a couple of people try to talk me into like think to really consider and think about pursuing the idea of putting up a Instagram page also with Film Fanatic. One of the people who I consider a friend who really tried to talk me into doing it was Ashley Seelig, who Ashley Seelig is the owner of Fog and also Lulu's, and I've known her for quite a few years now, and we have a long history with working together and collaborating together with my jazz group, the Whitehead Dean group, and especially with Quantum. Both of those bands have had a long standing relationship, but then we also have had these residency gigs for the last you know quite a few years. We did a whole bunch of those. We did it about 2 or 3 years in a row before the pandemic, and we just recently started, actually this year, to bring those residencies back. But during that time when we were working together in the beginning phases of where we started doing monthly gigs at Fog, sometimes more than once a month with Quantum and then eventually the jazz group. Ashley was really pivotal in saying, well, Instagram really is, it's evolving into this new thing of where, it's a great promotional tool for events, and it's not really, it's kind of shifted its whole kind of form to a degree of where it can be something that you can use big time for promotional aspects for your band or for your art or for whatever you're selling, or generally whatever your passions are. And I started looking into it about 5 or 6 months ago, and then that's when I made the decision to start it. And I started the Instagram page, and that's been a lot of fun, and that's helped a lot with growing the overall kind of idea behind this whole crazy thing that I do. So I basically just use that. I have some video content on my Instagram page, but mainly it's like a post kind of show where I do, or channel where I basically do a lot of posts and reviews of a lot of these films that I love, and but it's been great because it's really really increased the flow of people, and the audience, if you want to call it that. It's grown the audience quite a bit, and I started using it for this summer was the first year I started using Instagram for promotional things for music, and I was using it for quite a few of my Quantum shows that we had this past summer and this year, and I noticed that really was really helpful, and it definitely increased the traffic of people seeing the events, and I feel like it really helped play a key role in getting people to come out to a lot of the shows. So it's a great. I look at it now as a really great tool. And as far as YouTube goes, I was reluctant with that because I know with like the Facebook Live, when you go live on your page and anybody who's following you, they obviously get the notifications right away, and you're kind of more or less. That was the allure of it. You're kind of more or less, you get an audience right away, and you get people who are who follow you, and they will chime in right away, and you get an indication when you do those videos, like how many people are actually watching. And especially if you're doing shows around maybe specialty segments, or the thing that's really big that I noticed is if you do interviews, there's tons of people that chime in. I did a couple of shows where I did that. Well, actually, one Facebook Live show last year, and I noticed that there was a couple hundred people that were chiming in, and that was really cool. So I knew, from what I knew about YouTube, was that you're basically you're kind of in this big kind of black void, and I always felt like, well, it's really hard to get an audience with YouTube. It's very it's probably, I'd say it's more competitive. It's harder to get traction. It's harder to get attention. It's harder to get likes and people to subscribe to your channel. You have to really, just kind of chip away. And the key component, it felt like, was you really have to, have all these other platforms, and also share your content to these platforms, all the time. And to me, that felt a little bit more, felt a little daunting and kind of intimidating. It felt like a lot more like a job. And this is like a hobby of mine. If I can at some point make a little bit of money off of this, that would be amazing. But I never thought of it as a business per se. So I was reluctant. But then my other really great friend Daniel Wichman talked me into, he said, you should really do it. You think about setting this up. And because I've had a YouTube channel for a few years, but I've never really done anything with it. So then he was like, well, it's really viable. You can really, you can build an audience, and it can really you have the potential to really connect with people, and then also in that format or in the YouTube format, you can really expand on things. So then I just threw a little bit of caution in the wind, and then I got a little bit of a better setup. I had gotten a better, laptop computer, and I got a microphone, and so I decided to go for it, and it's been great. It's been a lot of fun. I've been really surprised with how it's been growing. It's always at a slower pace, I feel, but at the same time, I'm learning a lot about it, and it's been a blast. And I and the main reason I switched from doing or the main reason I transitioned from doing the Facebook Live videos to doing all my videos now on YouTube is I feel like the quality is a lot better. It's a lot more quality control. You can edit videos and you can delete things, and then you can format the video a little bit more to what you kind of envision. So overall, just the quality of it, I feel is much better. A lot of the times that I had done, in the past, I've done a lot of the Facebook Live videos over the past year, but a lot of the times I felt like the connection wasn't really great, or the audio was a little bit off, But overall, since I switched over to only making video, whenever I make videos, it's only going to be through YouTube. Ever since I made that definite transition, I noticed the quality is just a lot better, and I've gotten some good feedback from friends and people online that the quality's pretty good, and I'm continually trying to develop it and get the quality better, and trying to learn to kind of be more to articulate these shows a little bit more, and also to try some new things. Case in point, I had mentioned it's kind of been delayed for a while just because things happen in people's lives and people are busy with stuff and whatnot. But next, or actually tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a Facebook Live. A YouTube Live video with my really great friend Emmett Layler, who I play in a band with called Split Willow, and I've been friends with him forever. And he is he's one of my definite like movie buddies, and he's a really he's really into movies like I am. We spend a lot of time watching movies and hanging out, and we play music together. And he's just a great dude. But his passion, or his like I guess specialty, is he's really into Stephen King. So we're gonna be filming a show tomorrow, Sunday, for the YouTube channel, and it's gonna be more or less centered on us talking about Stephen King. So I'm pretty excited about that. When we had this idea come up about a month ago or a little less, I started doing a little bit more. I started doing a little bit of deep diving of Stephen King films, and I've always liked a lot of his films and some of his books. But I realized after I kind of switched gears and tried to focus a little bit more and trying to get prepared for doing a show, I was I was reminded and kind of blown away by how many films and things that have been adapted from his short stories or from his books, and it's pretty amazing. There's so many, yeah, an endless amount. I typically like a lot of the old school ones, like Christine or Salem's Lot, but there's a lot of great ones, and I feel like now there's he's probably even more prolific than ever. I mean, there's been so many just recently, and a lot of it is due to a lot of these online movie platforms that are now adapting a lot of his movies, even more so now. So he seems to be even more out in the forefront as far as a horror, writer, and you know, who's always been known for being an icon in the world of literature and some of his films. But it seems now he's even more in the forefront. So super excited about that. So we'll be recording that tomorrow, and then it'll be uploaded shortly after that. So super excited. And then the next show I'm going to be doing, which will be probably within a week or so, I'm going to be doing that big show that I'm really excited about with one of the actresses from the Friday the 13th franchise, which I'm super stoked on. I did that big show on all things Friday the 13th, and I had this idea: wouldn't it be cool to maybe do a show where, or some kind of special event to kind of cap off everything? So I was able to track down um, somebody who was involved. I got their contact information, but who was involved with directly with one of the films, one of the actresses, and she's been really gracious to agree to come on to the show. So super excited about that because that franchise, like I've talked about a lot in the past, and I still do. That's overall my favorite franchise. Very nostalgic. Part of my youth growing up as a kid, and it'll be super cool to like talk to an actress who was actually in one of the films in the in this amazing franchise that I've loved for years. So that will be a blast. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be happening pretty soon. So yeah, some cool things happening. And as far as the quantum stuff goes, I'm setting up. I'm in the midst now of setting up another show. It looks like I'm going to be setting up another show at the Poor Farm in Union with some friends. I'm trying to do like a 3 band bill show. Ideally, at least another band will be involved. But I'm going to try to do like a three. Try to make it so I can get 3 bands. And so I'm super excited about that. Getting that together. We've as Quantum, we've played at the Poor Farm. We've done like 2 shows there, and they were always really fun. Like the 2 shows were great. The first time we played there was last summer, and my really great friend Tom Luther, who is one of the most talented people I know, and I always feel like he's always ahead of the curve on so many ways and so innovative. I have a long history with Tom Luther. He was. I look to him. I look up to him as a mentor in a lot of ways. We we've played in lots of different bands together. When I first met him, or a couple of years after I met him, he had formed a jazz group, and then he actually had 2 different bands going. And at one point, I started filling in for the drummer who he was playing with, and then after that, I ended up joining another band of his where I was kind of the regular drummer. And so we played together quite a few years in those 2 bands, especially the one band. And it was all like pretty much jazz based, like modern kind of contemporary jazz. It was all original material. So we did, lots of gigs together through that. And then a few years after that, my great friend Mike Whitehead, who plays bass in Quantum, put together this jazz group called the Mike Whitehead uh, Band. And Mike plays bass in Quantum, and his primary instrument is trumpet. And so he put together this band where Tom also was a part of it. Tom played piano, and it was another great musician friend, Spike Hassan, who played bass. And we had that band for maybe 3 or 4 years, and that was also, I guess, primarily like an original based electronic, or not electronic group, jazz group. We mostly did a lot of the tunes, uh, a lot of original compositions from Mike Whitehead, and some of Tom's tunes. But we played together for a few years, and that was a really great learning experience and a lot of fun. And then, we've done a few other things, and during that time, Tom started getting way into doing a lot of electronic music. He used to have this really great group back a few years ago called Algorithm, and that was a really cool electronic group where I felt like it had a real like Brian Eno kind of inspired vibe. And Mike was also a part of that. There was also a poet, Jacob Freak, who was involved with that band, and he would at times read poetry over the music, and that was really great. And I remember the first time um, we actually, now that I think of it, both bands, Algorithm and Quantum, had played a show together, and it was probably, geez, probably 6 or 7 years ago. It was one of our, it might have been the first or second year that we started Quantum, and we had played a show together in Belfast at Aarhus Gallery, which was a really awesome gallery that I was really sad to see close. Over, you know, they closed about probably 6 years ago now, but we played a double header gig there, and that was really a blast. So, you know, we've kept in touch, and we haven't like played in a band or done anything formally in a long time. But then last summer, Quantum was still very much alive and working, but we just weren't playing any gigs due to reasons that all basically every band was in for. We just we the pandemic had hit, so we basically took all this time off, and but I was still writing a lot of music. So, but that's summer before last. Tom had this idea. He's done shows at the Poor Farm because it's pretty close to his house. It's a really amazing, beautiful brew pub in Union, and so he's done shows there, and he's like a local guy that goes there because it's just like right in his backyard. And Bill, the owner, is a super cool guy, and so Tom had put together this idea of doing like a two day um, music festival, and most of the groups that he wanted to that he had on the bill were electronic based kind of things. So he got us to play on the I think it was the second night. It was like I think it was like Thursday. It was like 3 days: Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And he had different groups play on each day, and we played on that Saturday, and it was super fun. It was a blast, and so it was our first gig back after a long period of time, and it was our first time playing at the Poor Farm, and it went great. It was really fun, and it was a really cool way of us trying to like get back, into trying to play live again. We had, like I said, we hadn't played live in a very long time, so that really kicked off things a lot. And then in that summer, I had the intention of trying to play a little bit. I booked up maybe one or two gigs, but I was looking to try to maybe play some more. But I was, kind of taking my time or taking baby steps into getting back into playing live. But fortunately, that after we played that show, we ended up getting a lot of other gigs. We played a lot, which I was really surprised by how it all transpired. We ended up playing a lot that summer at Thresher's Brewing in Searsmont, which was an awesome place that is still around, but unfortunately they're not doing music anymore. But it was a great venue, and we played there a whole bunch of times. We started playing there in August of that summer, and we played right up until like into the fall, almost into the winter of that year. I think one of the last gigs that we played there was like almost around Christmas time. So that was really great, and that really helped get us back on track as a band, and it was great because we during all that downtime, I was fortunate enough to have enough focus to write a lot of new material. So the timing was good. So during that period, it was a really great time because we were able to play this new stuff, out a lot and experiment and see what was working and what wasn't working. And we really, were fortunate to test run a lot of the material that I had been sitting on for a while. So it was great timing. And then after that summer, that was when I had the idea of that kind of spawned the idea of putting out another Quantum album. So, and then this past summer, Tom and I also did another show. He has this really amazing project called Sphere Music, and he's had it for maybe 1 or 2 years. It's a pretty relatively new project, and it's basically an all electronic group. And it very much, the reason I love it so much is to me it has a an Autechre vibe, and I might have mentioned Autechre on some of these videos, but Autechre, I love all kinds of music, but electronic music is still like, my favorite style, and Autechre is like my pretty much my favorite band, and they're very much like an ambient based electronic duo from the UK, but they also have a real kind of experimental, edgy kind of vibe to them. And this newer project that Tom had started, Sphere Music, kind of reminded me of that in a lot of ways. So we did a show this past summer at the Poor Farm. We did like a double bill show, and that show was crazy. It was a bonkers show. There were so many people there. I've played at the Poor Farm over the years, pretty good amount of times. I played there once with Ryan Moody, who is a singer songwriter in the area. Played there with Electric Bonfire, which is a band I play in. Um, and I think I've played there one or two other times. I think I played there with Vince, Gabriel, Blind Albert. And it was always great. We always had good, pretty good crowds, and it's always a great vibe there. But I remember this past summer when Tom and I played there, it was crazy. There was so many people there. It was packed everywhere you went. It was slightly overwhelming in the beginning because there was just so many people going, coming and going. But it was a really awesome show, and you know, and it was great. We did two sets. Tom did his set of Sphere Music, and then we played a set with Quantum, and it was a beautiful summer day, and it was all outside, and we played all of our own original material, and both of our bands have similarities because it's not straight up dance music per se. I mean, it has those aspects, but it's got a little bit of a fringe experimental edge to it. And but the main thing is it's all original material, and I was not sure how this kind of thing or that kind of thing would have gone over would go over for like the general public at the Poor Farm, a place that has music all the time, but not really not at all like similar to what we do. So, uh, but it went over really well. It was a really great show, and it was one of my favorite. I felt like it was one of the best shows. One of the definitely one of the highlights of the summer. And I've gotten to know Bill, the owner, a lot more the last couple of years, and he's very much into a lot of experimental music, which I was really excited by. So, so right now I'm looking, setting up a show to be setting up another show at the Poor Farm, and I'm going to try to get uh, Tom involved, definitely get him involved, and also one other artist that I'll eventually announce when I get everything solidified. So pretty excited about that. It'll be nice to have, it's always a thing with music in the area where it's pretty much seasonal. Band that I play with, well, like I mentioned, Split Willow with Emmett, my friend Emmett, who I'll be doing a show with tomorrow. We just finished up. We did a Halloween show last week, and that was our last show for the whole year that we have booked. So it's this fall was actually pretty busy for that band, which was great. So we went a little bit later than we normally do, I guess seasonally. Usually at early September in the past, it usually kind of drops off. But we went a little bit had a more had more dates that were going going a little bit later into the year, and we just finished our last gig last weekend. So and this year's been fantastic for that band. So, but we basically are taking the rest of the year off and probably the entire winter, and probably won't start back up until next spring. So it goes by, but it's also a long period of time of where there's not much going on. We'll still be busy with rehearsals and getting other things ready, but um, and I kind of that's the only part that I like having the downtime, but then I kind of don't. And I feel like with Quantum, like this year was really great with for that band. I felt like we really we're riding a wave to a degree and gaining a lot of momentum. And so I kind of want to, instead of taking the entire year off, or at least the summer, or at least the fall winter season off, I kind of want to try to keep some momentum going. It won't be as busy, obviously, probably as it was or could be like during the summer, but I want to try to keep the momentum going and and expand, and try to keep a profile going with some sporadic shows, if not a relatively steady handful amount of shows. So yeah, stay tuned for that. So I'm pretty excited about putting this new thing together. So yeah, I'm really excited. This is going to be the first show of a new series, and I'm going to be covering. It's a shorter series. It's basically three movies I'm going to be covering, and I've talked a lot about in the past about my love for comic books, and I know like there's a thing now where to a degree I think the general public has maybe suffered a little bit of movie fatigue because of the amount of say superhero movies that have come out in the last 10 years. Like it's pretty unbelievable, and I can understand that. But I have a good friend, my friend Eric and Patrick, who was really into Marvel movies and DC movies, especially Marvel movies, like I was. And we used to go see a lot of movies together, and we still do. But she kind of is burnt out from everything and everything that's or anything and everything that's related to basically comic book movies. She's like totally burnt out and not really doesn't really have an interest in them anymore. And I get that because it's daunting how many movies have come out. But at the end of the day, I still love them just as much as I've always had, as I always have when they first started coming out. And it's like anything. Like there's it's the biggest franchise on the planet. Say just the Marvel universe. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like if it's a good thing or a bad thing, a good movie or a bad movie. I don't think of it. I try not to think of it in terms of like, well, here we go again. Um, but I understand that, and I think I honestly think that there's been a little bit of a lag of quality after seeing Endgame from the last Avenger movie. There, I feel like to a degree there has been some good movies, but I feel like there's been a little bit of everything has been slightly anticlimactic after that film, and I think there's been a little bit of the studio has had a little bit of trouble kind of topping that or try to continue that momentum after such an epic movie and initially an end to an amazing franchise. But that being said, there's been some really great recent films, comic book movies that I can think of that I really loved. Like I was really into, I was really excited and kind of blown away by how great the last Spider-Man movie was. I'm a huge fan of that movie. I'm a huge fan in general of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, but I thought the three that he did were just spectacular. And uh, the last Spider-Man I thought was a tremendous movie, really great, really fresh, innovative, and a really exciting film. I feel like it was a real great like kind of love letter to uh, to Spider-Man. That I think that was an incredible movie. The other comic book movie which I was blown away by and I love so much is the Batman by starring Robert Patterson, directed by Matt Reeves. I love that movie to death. And that's a DC uh, franchise or comic book, and with that franchise, I really, I'm a huge Batman is my guy, and he's my favorite superhero. And there's been so many great films, particularly around obviously the Christopher Nolan films, The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, amazing films, especially The Dark Knight. Obviously, I had a friend one time describe that as the Citizen Kane of Batman movies. And it's pretty great, like kind of analogy. Um, but for my money, I've seen all of the films, and I'm a big fan of the Tim Burton films. But for my money, the Matt Reeves the Batman starring Robert Patterson is definitely my favorite incarnation or telling of the Batman movie. That movie I just think is just I just kind of feel like it's a masterpiece of a movie, and I'll eventually do a show on that movie. I've seen it a bunch of times and I've bought it. I saw it in the theater and I bought the Blu-ray for it, and it's pretty spectacular. And the other movie I thought was pretty good too was Shang-Chi. That's a fairly recent one. It came out last year. I thought that was pretty good, pretty solid, and in a lot of ways really entertaining. And Another movie that I thought was so incredibly highly underrated, but I just thought was just an amazing movie, which I really want to get on Blu-ray, is James Gunn's Suicide Squad. For whatever reason, that movie totally bombed in the box office, which was so surprising because James Gunn is such a name in the film industry, science fiction horror industry first and foremost, but then also with the amazing work he's done with for Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think are just they're amazing. Those films, I love the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're some of my favorite films in the entire comic book world. And plus, James Gunn is just such a brilliant director. Slither and just yeah, just an amazing director. Um, so I was really surprised when he came out with his R-rated version of the Suicide Squad, and it totally bombed. But I just think that movie is just amazing. It's easily for me the best representation of that comic book on the big screen, and it's just such a badass movie. And I really want to do a show on that at some point, and then also I need to buy it on Blu-ray at some point too. But a spectacular movie. Those three or four movies were films that I thought, as far as newer comic book movies or fairly recent ones, I thought were really spectacular. But this brings me back. This brings me to the whole reason of doing this show, and this is my favorite franchise or collection of movies in the Marvel universe, and that's the Marvel's Avengers, directed by Josh Whedon. Um, and it's hard to believe when I was looking up this movie because it's been a while. I just recently bought this. I've seen this movie a bazillion times, but I just recently picked it up on Blu-ray, really cheap, and it's fantastic on Blu-ray. It's definitely it's a serious ride, and it was directed by Josh Whedon, and I was really surprised. I looked up the date of when this came out, and it's hard to believe this came out in 2012 already. It's amazing. I remember seeing this in the theater and just being like really excited. And the Avengers are probably my favorite like kind of grouping of superheroes. Ever since I was a kid, it's got a huge. Batman is like my probably my favorite superhero character, but I'm also like a huge. I really love Captain America a lot. I've always loved Spider Man. I've always loved those characters, um, and then also a huge X Men fan. And Thanos has always been one of my favorite villains, if not my favorite villain of all time. Uh, with this, closely tied or a close second to Darth Vader. So I've always had a deep love for the whole mythology around the Avenger films. And like I've said too, I did a show way back when on the cult, and I was talking about how there, a lot of the focus on that show was about like mythology, and I had talked a lot about in that show on Joseph Campbell, who is one of my favorite writers, one of my biggest sources of inspiration, and he was he famously put out the book The Power of Myth, and basically tied in how the idea or the concept of how like mythology is this universal thing without barriers or walls. And he would do all of this extensive work of covering mythology from ancient times, from different regions of the world, and just show how they are so interconnected, and how different mythologies kind of borrow from each other, or to a degree, kind of steal. Um, like I would say, one example would be, say, Christianity, but the the whole like scope of how he would explain things is that these mythological characters that whether it's ancient Rome, or ancient Greece, um, they essentially are these gods that are created by man, and they kind of represent these universal traits of what it's like to be human. Whether it's about a yearning for power, or for love, lust, to have prosperity in times of war. And these gods that have been invented through mythology throughout the ages have always been a culmination of these desires and fears, and a way of expressing that, that component of that is part of the human psyche, and the human, what it means to be human. And so for me, I feel like the comic book, and growing up being a huge comic book fan, and I still am. To me, that's like say during ancient Rome, gods like Apollon, um, or various other, or Egyptian culture, Set and Sekhmet. These gods represented a lot to the people of that time during those ancient times. And for me, I look at comic books as being a real contemporary version of that. Like, they represent the same kinds of things, um, and essentially these are gods that are created by man. I never feel like man that, and it's all metaphorical. Like gods, like I don't believe in a higher power, so I believe that, like, essentially, God doesn't create man; man creates these gods, and mythology is all about that. So I feel like comic books and the whole comic book mythology is like an extension of that, and a representation of, like, I feel like the Avengers for me are a modern day mythology. So it's always been a huge, and like again, tracing it back to Joseph Campbell. I discovered him through watching an interview years ago, a long, long time ago, uh, an interview with George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, and how he took a lot of those concepts, the power of myth, and the use of masks. Um, this is how he, kind of created Star Wars, and was a big inspiration. And I, totally feel like that's exactly what these films are. And so, like, probably my favorite franchise in the comic book world are the Avenger films. I've always loved Josh Whedon. He's probably most well known for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Pretty campy, cheesy show, but still kind of great. Um, he's done some really great work. Some of the stuff has been pretty mixed, but I think some work he's done has been just amazing. I think, like, Serenity, I think, is an amazing, one of the best science fiction movies like ever. And Serenity was basically a part of the whole Firefly series that he started, which was a really amazing science fiction show that got kind of canceled prematurely, and then because they're such a huge fan base, he created a movie to kind of send off those characters, and it was called Firefly. And Firefly is just an amazing film. If you've never seen it, it's just amazing. It's probably Firefly is probably my favorite thing that Josh Whedon's ever done. Just amazing. Just some of the best science fiction action that you can ever see. Uh, he also um, he did a movie which I think is a really awesome horror movie a few years back called Cabin in the Woods, which I think is a really awesome, innovative horror movie. That's a movie too I'd like to buy eventually on Blu-ray and also do a show on. I haven't seen that movie in a really long time, and I love that movie. I've seen it a bunch of times, but Cabin in the Woods is a tremendous movie. So I was really excited that he was going to be, he was put in charge of doing the Avenger films, and this movie was definitely like everything that I kind of pictured and bet and more. Like it went beyond my expectations, because it's complicated because you're going to have, a storyline and a film where they're going to be covering multiple characters, all at the same time. So, it's a pretty complicated narrative. So how are they going to, do it in a way where it's like kind of cohesive? And I thought they did an amazing job. And I thought Josh Whedon did such a fantastic job with this film that, you could go into watching this. I feel like it's a standalone film, and you could go into watching it not knowing at all really who, say, Captain America is, or Spider Man, or Iron Man. That was one guy I left out when I said some of my favorite heroes, superheroes are is Iron Man. So he did a fantastic job with tying all of those things together. And I feel like The Avengers is a movie you could go in and watch it, not really knowing who Iron Man is, or necessarily who, not even really knowing who Captain America is. I just think it's a really great kind of introduction. It gives you enough backstory, but it's just an exciting thrill ride of a movie. And I also feel like it's the best representation of the Incredible Hulk ever. Just amazing. I'm a huge Incredible Hulk fan, and they just completely nailed it. It's an epic movie on such a big scale, and if you haven't seen any of these films, I highly recommend it. Even if you're not, say, a comic book fan, and I know there are people out there that have this thing against watching Marvel movies, it's just fantastic. But I'd suggest definitely check these movies out at least. There's a ton of other films, obviously, but for as a trilogy or a four piece movie set, it's definitely the best in my book. And I think you could watch these really without really having to have a background in all things related to Marvel. Just a tremendous movie. And so this is going to be the first video of a set that I'm going to do. I'm going to cover all the movies in the Avengers series. And so I'm pretty excited. I'm watching all of these films in succession, so I'm super excited. The only film I feel like is not that I'm not going to include in the series because I'm not really a fan of is The Age of Ultron. The Age of Ultron, I feel like, unfortunately, is kind of a clunker of a movie. I've only seen it once or twice. I remember seeing it in the theater, and I just thought they kind of missed the mark with the film. I feel like the story is kind of hunkered down with a lot of inconsistencies. I feel like it also has this thing of where there are certain aspects of the movie, especially around the creation of how Ultron becomes Ultron, it's pretty silly and ridiculous. And I also feel like I love James Spader, but his portrayal and his character of Ultron just is kind of all over the place, and it's hard to understand or to kind of get behind it as a villain. It's kind of there's good things about it, but I'm not a big fan of Age of Ultron. I was kind of let down by that. But I'm going to be covering, and I started it last night, is Infinity War, which I just think is a masterpiece. And then also the final one will be the Avengers Endgame, which I just think is another masterpiece. I just recently bought Endgame the other day on Blu-ray, so I'm super excited. I've only seen that once, but I remember seeing that in the theater and I was blown away. And I'm a huge Infinity War fan. I just think that movie is just so amazing. Infinity War and Thor's Ragnarok are probably my two favorite superhero movies. I kind of feel like Infinity War is probably my favorite. I just think it's such an epic movie on so many levels. But starting off, this is going to be the first show for today on this series. The very first Avengers, directed by Josh Whedon, came out in 2012. Definitely recommend. If you haven't seen this movie, you got to see it. And yeah, we'll see you next time for the next review. And this is Jason Dean, Film Fanatic. So thank you again for your love and support. We'll see you soon. Bye.